always have something to say. I think that's what draws this whole group together. I think we have a lot to say about many things, and it's hard to keep us quiet, you know, and settled. But yeah, but I just want to just offer my deep gratitude for this really wonderful gathering, this group, for my friendship with Karen. Karen is my elder and also my teacher as well. So it's very mutual. We're each other's teacher. Karen is quite incredible, as I think most of you know, or else you wouldn't be here. And I don't know what it is that I have to offer someone who has made it so possible for me to be in the world through her activism and her work well before I was born. Well, not too much, not too too much, time before I was born, but before I was born, you know. So I'm just deeply appreciative for that, and deeply appreciative for the work that many of you continue to do. I know many of you have been working for many decades to bring about a liberated future, an equitable future where everyone has access to the resources that they need to be well, right? And that is my principal ethic as a teacher, as an activist, is that my work is about making sure that everyone, including the people that I don't like, everyone has access to the resources that they need, that there are no restrictions, that there are no barriers, that we get what we need to be healthy and well, we get what we need to be safe, we get the necessities of living, of housing and food and medicine, but we get also access to communities that love us, that take care of us, and we get to determine the course of our lives. We get to make our own decisions about our bodies and about whom we choose to form intimate relationships with, right? To work for a future where we're living in harmony with the land, not in opposition. And really to live and to work towards a future where my freedom isn't something that is up to other people to decide. Like my freedom isn't something that should be legislated by people who hold power, over me and my communities. Freedom is one of the basic necessities, the basic resource that we're working for: freedom to choose, freedom to have access to what I need to be well and happy. So this drives my activism, right? And I come from a lot of different kinds of organizings, and kinds of movements. I was deeply influenced by the Catholic worker movement. And my mentor in activism and spirituality was, a close student friend of Dorothy Day, who was one of the founders of the Catholic worker movement. And I just really learned about the integration of spiritual practice and activism, by being a part of that work during my very formative years in my 20s. And that really influenced the work that I do now, right? As Karen pointed out, I'm a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, and what that really means, I'm not Tibetan, by the way. I have trained in the Tibetan tradition. Oh, by the way, I'm living on and teaching on the ancestral lands of the Creek, Muskogee, and Cherokee people here in what we call Atlanta, Georgia now. So that's where I'm located as well. But yeah, I decided to actually enter into this tradition because it really taught me how to be fierce and loving, right? And that's what I was concerned with. I am called to embody my fierceness, as many of you are being called to embody fierceness, because this is the energy that's needed when we are facing such delusion and such hate, right? such a lack of concern for the well-being of others. And that fierceness is directness, it's truth, right? But it's the most kind of direct compassion there can be. And this fierce kind of compassion is really knowing and seeing what the suffering is, and then addressing it and saying, you know what, this is what we're doing, right? There's suffering and we're going to disrupt suffering. There's violence, we're going to disrupt violence. There's inequality, we're going to disrupt inequality, right? And it's not something that we ask permission to do, it's something that we do because we're concerned about the well-being of all beings, right? Of course, that kind of fierce compassion means that we have to be willing to lose things. As some of you may have lost things like relationships, right? Or access to different communities and other resources because you're just, you're a troublemaker, right? You like to tell the truth. You tell it like it is, right? And people get really annoyed by that. A lot of people aren't interested in the truth, right? And the truth hurts. And the truth hurts because many of us have not trained to have the capacity to take care of the pain that the truth is pointing to, right? And so much of what's happening now, all this legislation that's happening, the anti-trans legislation, the ending of Roe versus Wade and so forth, so much of this legislation is just reactivity to deep pain and insecurity, right? And it's a deep reactivity to something that people actually don't know how to take care of. So they react to it and blame other people for their discomfort, right? And so when we react like that, we attempt to erase people. This person is making me feel uncomfortable, but like discomfort is not the same thing as being unsafe, right? And so we've lost a deep, deep capacity to understand the difference between being uncomfortable and being unsafe. And so we mistake discomfort with being unsafe, and we want to eradicate whomever we think is making us unsafe, right? And that's what I feel that we're really facing right now. And for me, my work is about helping to create ways for people to start taking care of and being in a relationship to the deep hurt, instead of weaponizing that hurt against other people whom they've deemed to be the source of that suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that creates a kind of activism that is much more holistic. That helps to disrupt the weaponizing of your own hate against others or your own deep hurt, right, against others. Because my goal and work isn't to reflect the violence that I'm receiving back to the people that violence is coming from. I don't want the people who are hurting me to hurt in the same way that I'm hurting, right? I want people to be free from hurt, because if people were free from hurt and suffering, they wouldn't be making the choices that they're making, right? They wouldn't be creating this kind of legislation or arming themselves in the ways that they're arming themselves, like if they were actually really happy and had the resources that they needed to be well, to be safe, to feel like they belong, right? To feel like they're safe enough to experience love and to return love back, right? That's the kind of activism that I'm so deeply engaged in, because that's the kind of activism that actually transforms our lives, it transforms our relationships, it transforms our communities and collectives, and it starts to bring about what so many great thinkers and visionaries have talked about, the beloved community, the enlightened society, the awakened collective, however you want to phrase that love, right, and care for ourselves and for others around us begins to bring about this beloved community, this liberated future, what I call the dream of the abolitionist, right? Or the abolitionist dream. And that's what I'm deeply invested in, a future, right, that is ushered in by love and care. Doesn't mean that this is a future that is void of conflict, that this is a future where there's no suffering. I'm not talking about utopia, right? Utopia is a fantasy. What I'm really talking about is a future where our essential labor is really about loving and being loved, right? It's about connecting, it's about belonging, it's about being rooted in a deep concern for the well-being of others around us, right? It's about letting go of the fear of being erased or annihilated, right? Because like I have to share space with other groups, and other people's letting go of that anxiety, right? And beginning to trust that people want the same things that I do.
Mm,
And I find that to be a fundamental core truth for me. People, we do all want the same thing, but we're not really going about, the right way of doing that, right? Like people want to be resourced. People want to feel safe. People want to be happy and people don't want to suffer,
yeah.
but we're not quite sure about how to get to that place of being happy and to get to that place of being free from suffering. So we get a little confused and start making choices that actually increase suffering, right? That we get kind of lost, and we start believing that what we're doing is actually going to bring about a liberated future, when in fact it's bringing about more division, more hate, more polarity, right? It's bringing about more of a deep insecurity about who we are and our role and place in society and our collectives and in community, right? I see so many people just afraid and scared and overwhelmed and deeply traumatized, right? And they don't know how to, again, deal with that. So they react to it and weaponize those experiences against others whom they deem as being the source of that suffering, you know. This kind of compassion, which is all this is the compassion of recognizing that there's suffering, right? That I am suffering, other people are suffering, and how do we disrupt the suffering, right? That's the work of compassion. I think this is exactly what we're all doing, but what I'm actually really speaking more directly to is how do we begin to deeply embody this ethic of compassion, right? This fierceness, right? In a way that we're taking care of our own hurt and our own fear and our own anger, right? Holding space for it, learning how to love those experiences, which offers us the space, right? To be in relationships with those that we maybe do not like and to not replicate the same kind of violence that they're expressing towards us, but to disrupt that violence through deep understanding, right? Through a clarity. And this kind of understanding also gets us really clear about our boundaries as well. So I will never be friends with Donald Trump, ever, never, never, ever. Actually, I have a long list of people I won't be friends with. And this is not the point. Actually, this is not a part of a liberated future or a liberated society where everyone's friends and skipping down the sidewalk holding hands. Like that's a Disney cartoon, right? The future that I'm actually talking about is a future where we love people, but we don't have to like people. Like when I say love, I mean I want you to be free, right? And I don't want to get in the way of your freedom, and I don't want to hurt you. But I don't necessarily want to hang out with you or live in the same neighborhood with you. But I still want you to have access to the resources that you need. That's what I'm more interested in, because we're never going to like everyone, right? We just won't. But I think it is quite possible to come into a space over, a period of practice, however long that period may be, years, it's been years for me, to come into a space that says, you know what, even though you're trying to annihilate me, I still want you to be happy. Because if you were happy and a resource, maybe you wouldn't be trying to do what you're doing to me and people in my community, right? Like that is real change, right? Getting clear about why people are doing the things that they do, right? Is it really that you hate me, or is it that you hate yourself, right? And if that's the case, how do I actually express a love and care for you, knowing that I don't have to like you, but knowing absolutely that I still need you to be free, right? And that kind of practice, compassion, love, that fierceness really begins to change us, and I know so many activists and organizers who think that they have to hold on to the resentment, right? To the hurt, to the anger, to be effective. You know, those energies, right, can feel really powerful, right? And it can feel like this is how we remember what we've survived or the hurt that people are causing for us. We think if we can just hold on to this stuff, like it can continue to motivate us into trying to bring about the future that we want to see. But instead, like holding on to these energies, this material actually becomes actually quite depleting. And over time, we actually become reflections of the people that are creating harm for us, because we are slowly being consumed by that same hurt that the most violent people are consumed by. I'm seeing it really clearly, you know, that there are people who think, they're on our side, they're on the left, the liberals, progressives, radicals, revolutionaries, all of that, whatever we call ourselves. We're this, but they're actually some of the most violent people as well, because they haven't actually dealt and begin to tend to the hurt that has underlined so much, of what they've survived, right? And a liberatory activism has to be rooted in compassion and love, which in my new work, I just kind of combined and say care, an awakened care. Like it has to be rooted in an awakened care that it embraces love, compassion, and joy in the work of liberation. That my activism isn't rooted in my anger, it's rooted in my love and my desire to free everyone from the causes and conditions of suffering, of trauma, of despair, of sadness, of hate, right? And that begins to kind of usher in a new way of being in the world, right? And you begin to actually draw in people into that kind of activism, because people will begin to sense this kind of caretaking that you're beginning to embody for yourself and for others. That the activism becomes a form of taking care of people, and in that taking care of people, beginning to disrupt the ways in which they're participating, in violence and logics of violence as well. And of course, so much of this is rooted in my ancestry. I am descended, primarily from enslaved people, right? And what my ancestors did was actually dream to freedom, and generation after generation indoctrinated, each generation with this dream of freedom until we got there, until we got free, right? Of course, that's only one level of freedom, freedom from bondage, right? But we have many more levels of freedom to continue, but I am still informed by the love, the joy, the movement, the art, the activism of my ancestors, right? Of people who prayed and organized, who fasted, who dreamed, who called in to the world their descendants, people like me who could embody the work, right, that they engaged in, and who could continue pushing forward into a future where not just Black people are free, but everyone is free, right? Black liberation is liberation for everyone, right? And I think any liberation movement has to be about the liberation of everyone, right? You know, the movement for Black lives is really about the movement to free everyone from these ideas and logics that somehow someone has to be on the bottom. Letting go of that idea and say, why can't there be a kind of equity now, right? That we all have access to the resources that we need. Not that people should get more than what they need. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we should have what we need. And we're not living in a moment where people have what they need. There are many people who have much more than what they need, and there are many, many people who have much less than what they need. But a society, a time where everyone has what they need to be well, what does that look like? You know? And again, the only way to get there is through the activism rooted in awakened care, you know, which is love and compassion and joy. So I want to pause here and maybe open up the space for questions, if you may have any.
Great. Thank you so much. Jewel, go ahead.
Rod, that's beautiful. And I wish you knew us all because you would know that this is Democracy Out Loud is a prime example in a way of people who have been called in by love and over the 6 years grown in love and compassion and learning in this way, learning care, not just for ourselves, but for everyone really. And of course, I personally credit Karen with her leadership while all this. I've learned so much from her and from all of you. But Rod, the thing that's really not a thing I'm used to hearing is, so I hope you'll speak a little bit about how fierceness shows up. Anger is a personal, we see the effects of it, but it's something we feel personally. And I have the feeling from what you talk about that fierceness isn't quite just limited to the personal in the same way that anger is.
Yeah, you know, fierceness is the truth, right? And it feels fierce because it is unrelenting. You know, it's something that just cuts through the delusion and it's unapologetic. You know, if you are the recipient of such truth, it feels really harmful because we're desperately trying to get away from the truth. You know, something about ourselves, something about our collectives, or like we don't want to deal with that. You know, so when someone drops that truth, it just feels very violent. You know, but as people embodying fierceness and expressing that fierceness is really just about seeing something really clearly and saying, yeah, this is what's happening, right? I think that is the role of prophets. Traditionally, prophets aren't necessarily telling the future. They're just telling you what's happening, you know, but no one wants to listen, right? No one's interested. And so when the prophets tell the truth, we get real triggered and then we try to erase the prophets, you know? And I think some of you do occupy that space of prophecy, like you're just telling the truth and there have been consequences. Like you know, the truth comes with consequences in a culture that's so far away from the truth, right? Because the truth is, for us as a collective in this country, is that this country was actually built on violence, and violence is how it's maintained. Right. So in particular, like all the legislation and everything around guns and all the public mass shootings that we're experiencing every day, it seems like now, like that is just an expression of how America was founded, right? And until we actually begin to metabolize that trauma and that violence, which gave birth to this collective, we'll never actually experience freedom from this violence, right? Of course, you have states like Florida around DeSantis, who is like trying to erase truth.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and yeah, it's fascism, like when you're trying to rewrite history to accommodate the delusion, of the moment in order to control and to maintain hierarchies and concentrations of power, right? But trauma doesn't get erased or rewritten. Trauma isn't collective trauma, personal trauma, intergenerational trauma, the trauma of the land, right? That still holds like a record of genocide, and other forms of violence and manipulation. Like you can't like rewrite that. That's not a history book, right? And until we actually return back to a deep relationship with the truth, with the land, with the history of this country, like we won't ever, experience the freedom. But I also understand this period to be a period of apocalypse, which is often misunderstood, I think people, when they talk about apocalypse, I think they mean to be talking about Armageddon, like, which are two different things for me. But apocalypse is actually about the unveiling of truth. It's the awakening of truth because there's no other choice. But when collective universal truth begins to awaken, there is a tremendous shift that feels very painful. Right. And that's what we're experiencing. It's very painful. All the old ways that we've been choosing all the old ways that or rather the things that we've been doing or participating in to live together, that's all shifting, right, and being disrupted, and because we're so self-identified with these systems, it feels like death and dying, but it's actually giving way to a more liberated future. And the question is, will we all make it to that liberated truth? And I'm not talking about death, even though death is a part of this. But what I'm really talking about is do all of us, or some of us, or whatever, do we have the capacity to actually begin to shift mentally, spiritually, physically, into a new way of living that's more truthful and honest. Mm-hmm. And that's the rift that we're trying to navigate right now. Are we going to get, many of us are going to get there, but who's going to get there, right? And how can our activism be an invitation to invite people into this new way of thinking and being and living together, and how many people are going to get stuck in this old way, and what will that relationship be between these two kinds of, community societies? And we're already seeing it, I think.
Something that you talk about a lot that I really appreciate, Lama Rod, is focusing on the vision instead of the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that for a long time, after the election of 2016, it was just problem after problem after problem. And but an interesting thing happened, I think, which was that, so for example, we would react to the separation of families, immigrant families. And then what would happen is we would bring together all of these beautiful groups of people, like the DACA kids and everything. And then that would be the vision, hundreds of us together, and so I'm interested in how we can increasingly focus our energy toward the vision and understand that we're creating the vision as we, and here's another thing, like, take care of ourselves and be the vision of compassion and freedom and joy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just really appreciate that. And I always, And I think right now it's a time to really shift into focusing more on the vision and the transformation that has to happen individually and collectively. That makes sense.
Well, I think part of it has to be letting go of what we thought things were going to look like in the moment. You know, you talked about, oh, and I was experiencing that particularly in 2016 and right after. It's like, oh, there's this really powerful space where different groups are actually beginning to talk to one another, you know, and and along with a partner of mine, started doing, you know, just some, you know, activism training, you know, like bringing a lot of this work that I've just been speaking about to activists so that can inform like the work that we were doing, you know, the actions that we were doing, beginning to do. And then over time, you know, what I began to understand and see from people is that the things that we really want to change, maybe they won't change. Like maybe the things that we're trying to reform actually should be abolished. You know, I think people started getting that in 2020, like a bigger transition from reformation to abolishing. And what does abolishing mean? And that's a really intense shift, right? To say there are institutions that actually should not exist anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of saying, well, let's reform this and make it more ethical.
Yeah.
That shifts your energy, right? And that gives you more energy to start creating like communities and spaces that are actually beginning to reflect these qualities and these ideas, you know, that, you know, just been sharing, you know, in this time, our time together.
And does it also, like, we're seeing things fall apart. Some things are going to have to fall apart.
Yeah, things are gonna have to fall apart. And I think that there are just things that we're just gonna have to ride out. And I think the climate is one of those things. You know, I think we're pushing well past like this threshold of no return. You know, I don't see us, you know, if you've been reading, you know, some of the reports that have been coming out, like it just doesn't seem like we're going to do the reforms that are possible or necessary. Then the question is, how do we survive beyond this shift that the planet will be moving through? Right? How do we change? Because there's nothing like severe shifts in the climate and the environment to bring about change in how we're living. And I think that's how it's going to have to happen. I think there will be a great loss of something and a deep disruption in this old way of living that will actually be the spark that would get people thinking about different ways of living. You know, unfortunately.
Yeah. Leidy Churchman.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Lama Rod. Thank you so much for speaking today. And I guess I'll try to be quick, but I was really into activism when I was younger in college, and I definitely, like everything you're saying, you know, I just felt really, I really felt like I didn't like the feeling of the spaces of activism, like where everyone, it was like you had to show how angry you were, and it just really, I don't know. And I sort of just like went into a path of art, and you know, my question to you is kind of like, what do you think about high art? Like not murals in the neighborhoods and arts and things like that, but I kind of like was drawn to this, you know, okay, I want to actually be in the art world because I want to change from within that canon, that art canon. And because it is a space, it's surrounded by so much money, but it is actually this sort of sacred space of complete and total freedom if you be in it. And so I've always really just that word vision, I've said I want to be in that freedom space. And I always want to bring people in, and I'm always so curious about it. And I'd just love to know what you think about that kind of space.
Absolutely. And it's good to see you again. I just realized I had to like pin your picture and I was like, oh, I know Lighty.
Yeah, I painted the Radical Dharma cover a bunch of years ago, which was really fun.
Thank you for that. But yeah, I just think like these art spaces are where so much of this transformation is going to happen, because that's where the innovation and the creativity, that's where the dreaming is happening, right? Artists offers us like visions like that the rest of us are too rigid to actually embody, right? But we have to let the art free. Like there has to be a letting go and allowing the art to have its way, the creativity, the fluidity, the movement, the vision. And we're afraid of the vision, right? Because it feels so overwhelming, right? But the vision can take care of itself, right? Like I just completed my third book, The New Saints, and it was such an overwhelming experience because for so much of the book was fighting the vision. And then I had to let go and let the vision have its way, to let the dream have its way. And that's what we have to do in these spaces. You have to let the vision and the dream have its way. You have to trust it, right? Because I feel like the vision is this separate, awakened entity that knows what it wants and is rooted and grounded in this kind of like freedom, right? But maybe we think it asks too much, it costs too much, but that's what freedom is. Freedom does cost too much. It is overwhelming. It demands everything, right? And if you look at abolitionist work, right, and particularly Harriet Tubman, like Harriet Tubman kept saying, it's either freedom or death. I'm going to get one of them. Right? How many of us are at that place where it's either freedom or death, or I'm going to try, and if I don't make it, I'm not going back, right? When I leave the violence and the bondage, I'm not returning, right? But we've made, as Reverend Angel always says, like we've found comfort in the suffering, right? And we're too comfortable and we have to get shook, right? And this is as Baldwin said, like James Baldwin said that like, that's so much of the work of the artist is to nudge, to shift, to shove people out of this complacency, and to offer people a vision of what it means to be free. And the vision hurts, right? Because it's so different than what we're doing. But part of the role of the artist right now is to hold space and move through the pain of what it feels like to have the vision move through your experience into the world, right? So it's lofty, it's a lot, but listen, it's all or nothing right now. Like this is, if you want to go all the way, this is the time to do it. But I will say, before we get to the next question, I will say that I believe that we'll get there.
Yeah.
Like we're going to lose some stuff. Like be prepared. Like things will shift and change and we will lose relationships and people. There will be death, right? There's going to be some violence, right? But we're going to get there, right? But all of this, I see it as going into labor or like producing something really intense. Like you have to move through that collectively in order to metabolize that energy, to free that energy, to clear it, so you have the space to bring about what feels more fluid and generative, right? But we have to metabolize that, and that's really painful, right? It's just like trauma work that we do. Like, like the trauma has to be touched, experienced, and released, right? And that's not fun.
Hold on.
And then you start doing it collectively, right? And then that means collective work means that we all metabolize as much as we can, meaning that some can do more, others can do less, but we're all doing something. But the issue is that like so few of us are trying to do the work for everyone.
Yeah.
And if everyone did a piece, then this would be a whole different experience. This would be, I don't want to say fun, but it would be much more, much more comfortable, than what we're going through. But that's never going to be the case, that there are those of us who will understand the truth and know much more of the truth and will feel obligated and compelled to do more work. And that's okay. I feel like I'm here to do that. I think many of you are, you're here, you're saying, you know what, I'm going to do everything that I can while I'm alive, right? And I think that's really beautiful because you will celebrate those choices at the moment of your death. That at that moment of your death, you will say, you know what, I didn't bring about the liberated future of the beloved community, but I did my part. And that's a really beautiful way to transition with no regret. Yeah. So yeah, we'll continue.
Thank you. Go ahead. Elena had her hand up and then Rachel. Elena, do you still want to ask a question? Because I feel like you put your hand down.
And
I think I need to move. I think I need to move in with you, Lama Rod, because I hear you. Karen has often said to me that I need to accept your path and let it land. And now I understand, Karen, my beautiful sister. So how do you find joy amongst all of this? And second, how do you motivate all of those folks to come along with me? Because I scream a lot and I am in a world of anger a lot.
Yeah. And it's strange because people stop listening. Like they're like, this is loud. Like this person's loud. And I see it for myself. I'm like, I'm tired of people yelling, like, leave me alone. But the thing is, when you begin to embody this work, things will slow down. And that's going to be real scary, right? Because it's going to feel like we're not doing enough. But when you begin to slow down, you begin to pay attention to more things. You begin to tune into people much more intimately. That intimacy is what brings about change in relationships, because this is about changing relationships, right? And I think we get too over-focused on this mass collective organizing and forget that like change happens in interactions, in the people that we're passing at the store, with our neighbors and so forth. Like, how can we embody these things for people who are always interacting with us, right? And to let the practice begin to change people, not my words, like not the rhetoric, but the action, the being. And I promise you, like when you start embodying this, people will notice and say, what are you doing? Right? And you give people another example of what's possible. And that's what we're missing. We're missing examples of what's possible. Like we have such a small handful of options. Give people more options. And it's not going to happen as quickly as we want it to happen. But yeah, there's a sense of urgency, right? But like you have to let so much of this urgency go because we start reacting to it and start actually getting super depleted. And then that's where the yelling comes from, because it's like, that's what we shift into, right? It's just like, I am so fucking tired. So instead, I'm just going to yell at you. And I think that's going to get you to do something different, But the joy itself, and you asked about joy, the joy, is this, for me, a deep recognition that this world is not my home either. Like it's my home right now, but like I'm gonna die, and there's gonna be a whole other situation that I'm gonna encounter, right? So the joy is that, but the joy is also knowing that like I'm doing what I think is right and what should be, and I celebrate that. Like I'm able to live in a life where I'm concerned about people, that like I spend my time with a group of people in a Zoom room talking about these issues, right? Like that's joyful for me. Like I can't think of any other way to spend my life than just helping people, right? So I know we have more questions.
We have two more questions. And I want to
Okay.
make sure we have time for Eloise, but Rachel's next.
I just want to say thank you for, whatever, how many years ever I've known you. But I want to make a couple of comments, but I really just want to ask you something that I think you wrote about in your next book. Number one, I want to say, as you know, there's this amazing book by Spring Washam about the spirit of Harriet Tubman. And in one of those pages, Harriet is actually delivering these messages, yes, to Spring. And Harriet, her full embodied spirit speaking to Spring, says when the American people can reconcile themselves to the truth of their history, it will change the whole planet.
Yes.
And this is what I think you, Lama Rod, I hope, I can't wait to get your new book. I think you've said this to us at some points, that bearing witness to one's own pain is part of the Bodhisattva path.
Yes. Yes.
So I just want to say that has been a huge relief for me, because I do a lot of that, choice or not. And sometimes I can't, do as much on the street because whatever. And so it just is heartening to hear that. And I want to just say one other thing, and then just if you have more to say about the bearing witness thing, that's what I'd like to say. But it's like when I was listening to you a few minutes ago, I was just thinking about Jesus, and I was thinking about Howard Thurman, the great Black theologian's take on Jesus, which was he knew how deeply internally resourced he was. And what was he teaching? He was teaching, you're teaching, love your enemy. We're not going to get anywhere without that. So you, I think, are in a long line of a great prophetic tradition of Black theologians, Jewish prophets, and God only knows who else. And I just thank you so much. So anything else you might want to say about this bearing witness aspect, I would love to hear. Thank you.
I will just, just say quickly here is that like you can't see the change that you want to see if you're so disconnected from your own discomfort, your own suffering. Like your suffering has to inform the work, because it's the suffering that we can use to connect to other people, right? It's like people aren't just well, sometimes this is changing for me, but like people in general, I'll say that like a lot of people aren't inherently evil, but I think everyone is deeply hurt. And how we are in relationship to their hurt informs how we show up in the world and how we build community with one another. If you're not dealing with your hurt, then often it's going to turn into violence against others. If you're in relationships with their hurt and really taking care of your hurt, then I think that forms a deep compassion that informs how we care for people and help people. So the people who are creating the most harm for us right now are people who just aren't dealing with their suffering, their insecurity. Right. Thank you, Rachel. And I think one more question. I know we're right at time.
We're right at time, but I want to make sure Eloise has a chance. Hi, Eloise.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm personally, I see happiness as temporal. And I wonder how you see it, as this is your desire for people to be, for all of us to be happy. And I see joy as spiritual, what happiness is. And I see happiness as my responsibility. My responsibility to, I'm happy because I choose to be, and do the things that are necessary. So talk to me a little bit about joy in your love, compassion, and joy versus happiness for
Yeah.
all.
I think you said it really, right on, where like joy is a state of mind. So joy is like the sun. The sun is always shining. The sun is always radiating heat and warmth. That's the state of our minds, right? But happiness can be something that it is temporal, it is impermanent, like it shifts. Like the sun is always shining, but there can be overclouded days, right? That covers up that access to joy. But so happiness for me is really related to contentment. Do I have what I need, right, to sustain, well-being? That's for me, that's happiness, right? And that's always shifting, but there's always joy that I take refuge in. I can call joy in when I need it, really intentionally. And that's something that we have to learn to do more and more, because joy is just a resource that's always there, that always is ready to hold the work that we're doing, because joy gives us space, like, to do work. If we don't have the joy, then we're contracted and shut down, which actually makes the work a lot harder, right? And that also adds work to other people, because when we're not experiencing joy or happiness, then we actually become kind of heavy for other people to hold, right? So in our communities, when we're working, calling in joy actually makes collective work a lot more generative and a lot more effective.
I think I'm sorry, think of the gospel song, "This joy that I have, the world
can't take it away. Yeah.
And the world can't take it away."
Exactly.
Well,
Right.
guess what? This is our closing song.
Oh my God, is it really?
It is. It is. Oh my God. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lama Rod, and thank you, everyone. This has been so wonderful. And we're gonna have the closing song, "This Joy That I Have."
Okay. Well, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Yeah, the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away.
The strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. No, no, the world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away. This love that I have, bodhicitta, the world didn't give it to me. This world that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This love that I have, bodhicitta, the world didn't give it to me. No, the world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away. Sing it, Randa.
Well, this pride that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This pride that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Hey, this pride that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Yeah, the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away.
This peace that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This peace that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This peace that I have, joyful effort, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away. Ah, sing it with joy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, this joy that I have, The world didn't give it to me, you know it. Oh, this joy that I have. Now the world doesn't give it to me, no, no, no. This joy that I have. Well, the world didn't give it to me. Yeah, the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. I said now, the world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away. Michael, you want to give it one more?
The world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone unmute, as we learned from Reverend Barber. Forward together. Not
One step back.
forward together.
Not
One step back.
Forward together. Not
One step back.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank
you.
you, Karen.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Lama. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Lama Rod.
Deep bows. Gratitude. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Struggle continues.
Yep.
I think Kay Rebo was here for the first time today, too.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it was great today. We had a lot of
Awesome.
Olivia here from Washington, D.C. That's really cool. Thank you all so much. That was
Thank
beautiful.
you, Karen. I look forward to it so much. It's
Yeah,
amazing. Don't want him to stop talking to us.
I know. I know. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for your questions.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good week.